All right, I'm back. Gaza War, day 263. No end in sight. Tonight's question is will they or won't they? And as I think you know, the answer is that they will. So we're talking about when the all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel will begin. I think it'll be sooner rather than later. I watched Elijah Magnier on Rania Khalek's excellent show, Dispatches, Breakthrough News, and he broke down all the reasons why it would be completely irrational for Israel to attack Lebanon right now. And you've heard all of them. You've heard the fact they're unable to defeat Hamas. Hezbollah is exponentially more powerful, more capable of delivering more damage to Israeli society. Nasrallah, for years, has explained all of the things that will be targeted in the event of an all-out war: the electricity grid, power, water, all the military facilities, the missile launching sites, the airports, all the infrastructure is up for grabs. Hezbollah has said they will hit whatever they want. He said there will be, Nasrallah in his most recent speech said that there will be no ceiling. He said that before. He said it in his latest speech. Um, Irrational, yeah. But that I have also been saying on this channel that trying to understand Israel's behavior through military rationality is not how you can understand Israel's behavior. Ordinary strategic calculation is actually a minority view, perhaps in the West, and certainly among the neoconservative or Zionist worldview. Ordinary strategic calculation is not how they see the world. They see the world in terms of will, racial superiority, and will. They will dominate the region through the force of their will, or they will die trying. Uh, People have often quoted Hitler at the end of World War II, and where he said he expressed how disappointed he was with the German people and how they failed. They failed him. In his view, the German people had failed him because they lacked the will to follow through with the program that his party was trying to enact in the world. And that is that is the worldview from which the current Israeli decision makers derive their understanding of the world. And I am sure that the Israeli elites are looking at the human material, as they once referred to the Jewish population. The early Zionists referred to the Jewish population as the human material, and they found it disappointing. And I'm sure that is the same kind of conclusion that the Israelis are coming to now, is that they will either succeed based on their will, or they will have been failed by others other than themselves, because the people making the decisions, are infallible in their own eyes. I can do a lot of reporting from the fronts, and I will resume that in future sit reps. There's so much to report. We've seen new massacres over these weeks, murders of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas. More of his family members were murdered by Israel. He's made another dignified statement like he did last time. We see the West Bank is being invaded again, another one set of raids in Qalqilia and Jenin. There's fighting in North Gaza and Beit Lahia. Ansar Allah from Yemen has hit an Israeli ship and a US Navy ship. The US Navy versus Ansar Allah battle continues. The US withdrew one of their carriers, but then they put another carrier back. So the Ansar Allah said something like that. They said the first round goes to us, but we're getting ready for the next round. So the next round of that naval war is on, and it's happening now. But that's that's a really short version of the report. I'll resume my normal reporting from the fronts probably in the next video tomorrow or the day after at some point. But today I kind of want to talk about the cracks that are forming in Israeli society, the pressure cooker that the Israeli elites are in right now. And I watched, did you guys watch the drone footage? Did you guys watch the the drone footage that that Hezbollah released? The Hoopo bird part one. I watched it when it came out last week or whenever it was, but yeah, I guess it was about a week ago. But I didn't really understand quite the import of it until I watched the translated version. So Laith Marouf, Free Palestine TV, they shared a translated version of this video. And when you watch, if you're an English reader, I can read Arabic letters. I know some Arabic words, but I can't just follow like, hopefully I will be able to, but I can't just read and see what they're doing. But as an English speaker, an English reader watching this with the English, where the level of detail of what they're pointing out and the targets and how they're showing exactly what these facilities are and how they know exactly what these facilities are and how they've built this target bank. It's if you were the Israeli military, this would be a terrifying video, a, a, a terrifying video for them. And they're showing the military industry, Iron Dome, David Sling batteries, military bases. It's a really I would highly recommend that you watch the whole thing. It's on Free Palestine TV, Twitter. I retweeted it. Take a look at it. Watch the whole thing. It's 9 minutes. Watch it and imagine what you would feel if you were an Israeli military planner who was raised and and marinated and stewed in an atmosphere of complete domination and superiority and the belief in your own superiority over these undermensch, these under people. And imagine that view that you're used to putting out there, the view that you're used to having, that aerial God's eye view of what you're going to destroy from the air, and having the facilities you built in the occupied lands, the military facilities you've constructed, and having that view being broadcast back to you. And maybe it was intended as a warning by Hezbollah when they published that. Or maybe it was precisely intended as a provocation. And I think I could go either way, but it was certainly taken as a provocation. So it drove Israelis into another kind of level of um, I don't know what to call it, irrationality. They said this means we have to go to war. The fact that they can do this means we have to go to war. We have to destroy them once and for all. So the thing is, there's that drone footage, and then there's Nasrallah's speech. And Nasrallah's last speech, I talked about it in my mini sit reps. If you saw on Instagram or on my TikTok, I don't really have much presence on either one of those platforms, but I did during my travels. I tried to make a few mini sit reps from the road because I knew I couldn't do a proper one until now. And the thing is, I think I said this in the mini sit rep, but there's not a feeling. If you watch Nasrallah's last speech, it's not a last warning. It's not a don't do this, Israel, or else. That's not the tone. The tone is not, the tone is not the tone of someone trying to talk them out of it. The tone is more like I read it more as like a this is the last time you're going to hear from me until the war. The next time you hear from me, we will be fighting. And it was also an explanation. Nasrallah's speeches have all had this element of explaining to the people in Lebanon the concept that has come up. It's been put in many different terms, but it's the concept. The one way that he put it is the price of resistance versus the price of surrender. And he's always been putting that theme that the price of surrender is much higher than the price of resistance. And the last speech was an explanation to Lebanon to say, we tried, but we are not getting out of this without a war. We've tried hard to avoid a war, which will end up with massive civilian suffering, the destruction of civilian targets all over Lebanon, the destruction of Beirut. Many pro-Israel psychopaths have been showing Beirut and saying this is the before picture, as if Israel is immune from retaliation, which it's not. But they don't understand that, and that's another element of the pressure. Um, I didn't cover Nasrallah's discussion of Cyprus in my mini sit reps. So it's evident from the way Nasrallah talked about Cyprus that Israel had planned to use Cyprus and plans. Israel plans to use Cyprus as its strategic depth. So they're aware, on some level, military planners, the Americans, the Israelis are aware that Hezbollah is capable of destroying their airfields, their radars, making it very difficult for the spectacular Israeli Air Force to do their thing. And that if the Israeli Air Force can't do their thing, they're not the Israeli army. They're not the Israeli military is not the Israeli military if its Air Force is not working. So their idea was we'll use Cyprus. We'll use Cyprus. We'll use their airports and we'll attack a pincer movement or some clever strategy where they're not expecting us to attack from the sea, and we'll use Marines and we'll attack but from Cyprus and from northern Israel. Maybe they were planning something like that, and Nasrallah let Cyprus know that if Cyprus is used, it'll be treated no differently from any other Israeli base. It won't have any protected status because it's not technically Israel. If it allows Israel to use its base, it'll be treated just like Israel is by Hezbollah. So that probably has caused some delays, some revisions of plans. They're probably drawing up a new plan. They're probably having to have a contingency. They may literally not have thought that Hezbollah would dare to strike Cyprus, as if that would take more audacity. But Nasrallah and Hezbollah have said they are not ruling out attacking first. They're not ruling out attacking the Israelis while they're mustering, while they're preparing to attack. If they get conclusive sense that Israel's going to attack, maybe they'll attack first. And they have Nasrallah also talked about invading Israel, invading ground troops into Israel, into Galilee, and he said maybe we will. It's still on the table. The Iraqi resistance, the Ansar Allah in Yemen, they have tens of thousands. Yemen has hundreds of thousands of soldiers that they've said have the only problem is they have no way to get there. And the Iraqi resistance said their main problem has been the distance. But if Israel goes to war with Lebanon, then they'll be at zero distance. They count 60,000 fighters. Yemen has been talking about how they have uh, 300 plus thousand. Um, so this is causing a lot of pressure on Israel. Why? It's not that there's always since October 7th, there's been a tiny and politically, I don't want to say irrelevant, but at least small and easily dealt with block of Israelis who want a prisoner exchange, who want to get the prisoners back, even if it means giving up the option of torturing and imprisoning thousands of Palestinians. The majority of Israelis are not willing to make that trade anymore. The majority of Israelis are trying to toughen themselves. They're trying to create a new kind of Israel that is not averse to military casualties. It's not averse to civilian casualties. It's willing to see hostages killed for the sake of punishing Palestinians, for the sake of torturing and imprisoning Palestinians. That goal, genociding, is higher than preserving Israeli lives, higher than getting Israeli hostages back. They're trying to create that Zionism. They don't like the Zionists don't like the idea of being soft and humane. They want to be tough. They want to do what needs to be done, whatever needs to be done. And whatever needs to be done is always genocide. That's what always needs to be done. And so the crack in Israeli society is not between the genocidal and the non-genocidal. Israeli society is broadly speaking genocidal, just like all of their followers outside of Israel. But the crack in Israeli society is between genocidal blocks. The followers of Meir Kahane, the Kahanist West Bank settlers, those are the tough, fanatical, not super religious. They have the trappings of being religious, but um they're the real fascists, the real kind of Nazi equivalents. They're a big power block. You've heard of their Smotriches and the Ben Gavirs. These are the people who killed what's the peace, the guy who had that peace deal, Israeli. They're the people who massacred all the Palestinians in that mosque. They're those people. They're the Kahanists. Then there's the liberal Zionists, the high tech people, the people, the startup nation. The Air Force is mostly those kinds of people. They are, they believe that Israel is sexy. It's Israel's playing on the beach. Israel is starting up computer companies and software companies. That's what Israel means to them. And then there are the religious Zionists. They're really religious, so they want to go to Israel and they want to study the Torah. They want to do scholarship and they want to be exempted from the draft. And they've just been um, conclusively, I'd say, ruled, legislated, and the Supreme Court has ruled they are going to be drafted into the army. So they're not happy. The liberal Zionists want them to be drafted because they don't want to be making all the military sacrifice for this project. And the Kahanists, whatever, as long as they can keep genociding. Now, these blocks are all genocidal, but that's the only thing that they have in common. That's the unity, the hatred and contempt for everyone that isn't them, and especially Arabs. But if you have hatred as your society's glue, then you're driven ever more to hatred. You've got to do more, and it's like a drug. It really is analogous to a drug addiction. You have to do more and more to achieve the same effect, and eventually you overdose. So, like, what's the equivalent in terms of hate? The army's atrocities are the media product holding their society together. That's putting a lot of pressure on these atrocity videos. These atrocity videos have to achieve a lot. They have to substitute for actual military achievements. They have to substitute for social cohesion. They have to substitute for a political project that could offer some sustainability to their society. And if hateful atrocity propaganda is your society's glue, that makes it hard to conduct diplomacy like normal countries do, to go out there and represent, to go out there and explain your position. Look at the way the Israeli ambassador to the UN behaves. Look at the way these spokespeople go when they go on Piers Morgan's show or whatever. Look at the way they behave. Look at the way the counter protesters behave. The way that they physically assault anybody who's weaker than them or smaller than them at the first chance, whether it's on camera or not. They can't go and explain their position. They can't. Hatred is their position. Hatred and racist contempt is their position. That's who they are. That's all that they have to keep their society together. That also makes it hard to conduct strategy, to do strategic planning. They can't plan increasingly because planning involves an assessment of what you have and what your opponent has, what you can do and what your opponent can do, what you can't do and what your opponent can't do, your alliances, your resources, material resources, your weapons, your stockpiles, your military industries. You can't, if you believe that you're racially superior and your enemies are subhuman, that doesn't help with those kinds of calculations. You have to be able to put those aside. You have to be able to compartmentalize those kinds of ideas. They can't compartmentalize them. If they compartmentalize them, there's nothing left of their identity. There's no basis for cooperation. So now the religious Zionists are being drafted, but that's not gonna the numbers of men that they can put in the field hasn't been their problem. They have more men in the field than the Palestinians have. They have more men in the field than Hezbollah has. They have the ability to field armies of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The problem is those soldiers can't go into the underground tunnels and they can't destroy them from above and they can't fight infantry battles. They can't come out of their armored vehicles. They can't seem to keep themselves out of windows. So they're they're unable to defeat the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, despite having numerical and equipment advantages and unlimited backing from the US. So, but they can't explain that. They can't explain that there's some kind of military strategy and a kind of a unified strategy that the Palestinian resistance have for using their weapons and using their defensive systems that the Israelis don't have an answer for. So the only way that you can explain it from a Zionist framework is as a failure of will. That's the only thing they understand. So they look at Gaza and say, okay, it's been 9 months and the job's not done. It must be because of a failure of will. And they can't understand that their military might not just be up for the job of defeating the Palestinian resistance. Even as it's happening, they think maybe it's because Israel's being too humane. That they sincerely believe that. They sincerely believe while a genocide is going on, the Israelis who who would explain why it's not over by now would explain it in terms of failure of will and of Israel being too humane. The people in the north of Israel who have been displaced by Hezbollah, they sincerely believe it's a failure of will to go and get Hezbollah. They can't understand the IDF's hesitation, the Israeli military's hesitation. They cannot understand the possibility that Israel might not be able to beat Hezbollah. So, and people like Benny Gantz who have left the war cabinet, they're trying to ride this feeling, this confusion into power themselves. But if they were in power, they would have no more answers than Netanyahu has. So there's no answer within Israeli society There's no one in Israeli society as it's constructed that can explain what's happening. They cannot understand what's happening. Their framework, their worldview does not allow what's happening. And it's something I wondered about. There's also something else I've wondered about that I do see happening with Israel and its supporters right now. They're structural lying, as John Elmer likes to say. They're structural lying. They're systematic lying about everything all the time is finally starting to have some effect on their credibility. Which also confuses them. It confuses them to because they believe that if they will us to believe them, then we'll believe them. And they're not understanding why people don't believe them anymore. They don't get it. They're saying it with just as much oomph behind it as they always have. They're calling people anti-Semites with the same intensity that they always have, but no one cares about being accused of racism by genocidal people, by openly genocidal people. Nobody cares that an openly genocidal person might call them a racist. Nobody cares about that. Nobody, they lie so much that when they say horrible things, nobody believes them anymore. And that's really hard to recover. There's no trust. Zionists are not trusted. And it doesn't matter that they try to conflate that with racism while they're openly practicing the vilest form of racism. So the Israeli army, the IDF, they want to get some rest, right? They want their army to get some rest. They want to shift the war into some kind of unending series of raids and let starvation do the job. That's always been what they wanted. They wanted for Gaza. Their dream was to let starvation do most of the job and and then do raids, mowing the lawn. They want to go back to mowing the lawn. That's what they used to call it. But the resistance axis, the whole axis, is not gonna let that is not gonna let that devolution take place. Instead, they keep turning the temperature up. They keep turning up, some people have called it the pain dial. So that by just keeping that up, the pressure in the Red Sea, the economic blockade, the tit for tat on the northern border, the destruction of armored vehicles and infantry units and ambushes in all over Gaza, up and down Gaza. It's this pressure on the Israeli leadership that is just immense. It's immense and it's immense, and they can't explain what's going on, and they can't relieve that pressure. Genocide in Gaza hasn't relieved that pressure on them, that psychological pressure of being unable to explain in terms of their worldview what is going on. How can this be happening to us? How can we be unable to defeat our inferiors? How can we be unable to clear Hezbollah out of Lebanon? All we have to do is clear them out. Who's failing? Who is failing the strength of who is lacking the will to do this? Why can't someone with a real willpower come and get this done? And that's why I think they're going to invade Lebanon, even if the smart ones among them know they're going to lose. They have no other way to release the pressure they're under. I don't see any way they can release the pressure they're under. And I don't see them getting the clarity to understand the distinction between the material reality that they're facing and their will-based worldview. And I do think that they're delaying. There are military planners among them that are planning this attack, and they probably had the plan to go relying heavily on Cyprus, and now they're scratching their heads again since Nasrallah's speech. They probably didn't understand Hezbollah's targeting. They probably are now trying to adjust based on what they saw in the drone footage and what they can infer. But I actually think people have said Nasrallah doesn't bluff, right? You've probably all heard that. So like when Nasrallah says something, people have to take it seriously. But I have, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm sure you will. But when Israel said they were going to go into Gaza and treat the people of Gaza like human animals and cut off water and cut off electricity. Israel said they were going to go and commit a they said basically they were going to commit genocide there, and they did. And in 2006 and before, they said they were going to go into Lebanon, and they did. And now they're saying they're going to go into Lebanon. I think they're going to go. I don't think they're bluffing either. Um, and I don't know whether they were hoping Washington would stop them. When the Gaza war was getting going 8 months ago, I wondered on this channel whether they were hoping that Washington would stop them. And it became clear to me that Washington wasn't going to stop them, whatever they were hoping. And Washington said they're not going to stop this time. Washington said, you've got the green light. We're going to support you. Whatever you do in Lebanon, we're going to support you. So that's not going to stop them. They they probably wanted to bomb the airport. They signaled that, right? They signaled that they wanted to bomb the airport. They planted that story in the Telegraph and about how there's weapons at the civilian airport so that they could, there's only one reason to do that kind of story. It's to prepare people for bombing the airport. But while they're probably reworking their plans, I think their plans are to invade. And in a little while, not very long, they're going to settle on a plan, even if it's a bad one. And they might even have some surprises. They're certainly going to commit some spectacular atrocities. But what we're seeing now, what we're going to see is just more rolling, deeper attacks by Israel into Lebanon and deeper attacks into Israel by Hezbollah in response. And they're going to start mustering, and they're going to get attacked as they're mustering, and they're going to come up with some plan, and they're going to throw themselves onto Hezbollah's prepared defenses, and Hezbollah will launch exactly the war with no ceiling that they've promised. And this is all going to happen because Israel cannot relieve the pressure coming from the dissonance between their belief that their will can solve all of their problems and the material reality of the situation they're in. I'm going to stop there for tonight. Hang in there. Um, Hang in there and check out the live stream tomorrow, day 264 on Electronic Intifada. And we'll see you in the next one. We're back now, so you can expect the regular sit reps from here on out.